Welcome back to Breakdown. Today is November the 17th, 2021. JJ, you ready to do this?
I'm ready. I was born ready.
All right, then. Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, JJ. Saturday, Michigan State plays at Ohio State in Columbus. What aspect of Ohio State's game should Mel Tucker be most concerned?
Whew. Well, Ohio State has the number one scoring offense in the country.
Oh, number one in the country?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that would also mean they have the number one scoring offense in the Big Ten as well. Um,
Okay.
they're also number one in total offense and number six in passing offense. And Michigan State is 111th in total defense. So I think that side of the ball is the side that Mel Tucker has to concern himself with. when,
Okay.
when MSU's on offense or when MSU's on defense and Ohio State's potent dynamic offense is on the field. I think.
Okay, I'll buy that. On the reverse side, what aspect of MSU's game should Ryan Day be most concerned?
Well, they struggled against Oregon to contain a mobile quarterback. Anthony Brown rushed for I think like 70 some yards. I think Peyton Thorne will have to be that for Michigan State, but Michigan State has the ability, the capacity to give Ohio State trouble in that respect. Ohio State is actually a pretty good rushing defense, but Michigan State's best player is their running back, and I'm not sure if Ohio State has seen a running back as dynamic as one Kenneth Walker the third. So I think lean on the running game. Uh, make their quarterback run the ball. I think those are the two components of the game that Ryan Day will be most concerned with.
I thank you for your comments. JJ, Michigan State opened as a 20-point underdog. It's moved to 19 right now.
Actually, I saw it at 18 and a half.
Oh, hey, by Saturday it might be down to one.
Who
Okay.
knows?
Oh, okay, that's good to know because I actually thought after it opened and even after it went to 19, I thought it would go down. I thought it would go down to like 15 or something like that. But given that they are 18 and a half point dog, I want you to make a case for Michigan State winning the game outright without the points. And if you need some help from me, just let me
um, yeah, I mean, I definitely would like your insight on that.
know.
But I mean, I think Jalen Naylor is getting healthy. He might be ready for that game. I
I
think
hope so. I hope so.
he's important for what Michigan State wants to do. But I think just controlling the ball, um, keeping the ball away from Ohio State as long as possible, scoring touchdowns and not field goals is important.
Okay.
Making sure that confusing Stroud if you possibly can with exotic blitzes from different locations. Make him play like a freshman the freshman that he
So
is.
so if they blitz, that means man to man coverage.
Yeah, normally.
Okay.
I mean, there are some zone blitzes that you
That's
can do
true. That's
too.
true.
That
That's
those are you see those more in the NFL than you do in college.
yeah.
But I mean, they're gonna have to blitz everything exotic that they do. They're gonna have to throw the kitchen sink at Ohio State, I think.
Okay.
But what do you think? How do you think Michigan State can win
Well,
straight up?
Ohio State has had a better road record this year than home record. They've already lost at home. I like Michigan's bend but don't break defense, as you said a couple of weeks ago. If they can make Ohio State get field goals in the red zone, uh, Michigan State, I should have said. If they can make Ohio State get field goals in the red zone, I feel that Michigan State has a good chance. And I also think that Ohio State defense is going to give up at least 44 points to Michigan State. So if Michigan State can hold them, just hold them to 43 points, it's a W. That's my take on it. Uh, you know, last week was a really good week for Ohio State. I'll grant you that. But let me ask you this question regarding the game, the Michigan State Ohio State game. Uh, Ohio State stomped Purdue 59-31 last week. They got Michigan coming up next week. Is the Michigan State game a trap game for Ohio State?
No, Michigan
No.
State is ranked seventh in the country. I don't think that any team in the top 10 can really be a trap game. If anything, I think Purdue was more of a trap game for Ohio State, sandwiched in between
Penn State,
Penn State and Michigan
Michigan
State.
Okay.
But I don't see this as being a trap game.
Interesting. I kind of do, but I see your point. I see your point. But I do think that Ohio State knows that Michigan is going to be scouting them like crazy. And they got to have Michigan in the back of their mind because they're so close. They're so close. And then seeing that Michigan State had lost to Purdue and Ohio State just blew Purdue out the water like nothing. And Ohio State being a 20-point opening favorite against Michigan State, they might just be taking Michigan State a little bit like light, but time will tell. But that's my take on it. Uh, Moving on to my next question: who had the better win, JJ, last week? Was it Michigan's 21-17 win over Penn State, or was it Ohio State's 59-31 win over Purdue?
I would definitely say that Ohio State's win over Purdue was more impressive, just based on the way that Purdue program is trending and the disarray that Penn State seems to be in. They seem to be in flux. Penn State lost to Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan. They're just on a downward spiral right now. So I don't really know what you can extrapolate from Michigan's comeback win in Happy Valley.
It was it though. Taking credit for what you said about Penn State, that still was a big win for Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it was a significant win. It gives Jim Harbaugh a winning record over Penn State, and he doesn't have a winning record over any of like the top five teams in the Big Ten. So now he finally does have a winning record over one of the five best programs. So, I mean, Penn State's is still a good team. They have a lot of tough losses. They've had some tough injuries, but
In that win last week, Ohio State, I grant you it was very impressive. They had over 620 yards in that game,
yeah,
and they had over 8 touchdowns. That's very, very impressive against a team that has been a top 10 killer in beating Michigan State. What did Purdue beat? Iowa, when they were in the top 10. I mean, Ohio State was impressive. I don't know who I would say had the better win, but I won't disagree with you on that one. I want to move JJ now. I want to talk a little bit about football in general. And then I'm gonna hit the SEC, and then we'll come back to the Big Ten.
okay.
But my question to you now is: who benefit more from Oklahoma's 14-27 loss to Baylor last week? Was it Cincinnati or was it Alabama?
I think the benefit is for Cincinnati.
Okay.
I think when you see the college football playoff ranking Michigan ahead of Michigan State, I think that might be setting the table for them to potentially rank a one-loss Notre Dame team over Cincinnati, saying that the head-to-head doesn't necessarily matter. I know the Michigan game was played at Michigan State, whereas the Cincinnati Notre Dame game was at Notre Dame, so that should hold a little bit more significance. But if I'm Cincinnati, I'm a little worried about that, about them putting Michigan ahead of Michigan State. So I think they have a little less margin for error. And when it comes to Alabama is the number 2 ranked team in the country. But when it comes down to it, I think that they are gonna have to win out to get into the college playoff.
Okay, you are reading my mind because that was my next question. My next question I was going to ask you is: can a 2-loss Alabama team get into the playoff ahead of a 1-loss Oklahoma or a 1-loss Oklahoma State or a 1-loss Wake Forest or a 1-loss Notre Dame or whoever 1-loss team? You're telling me that a 2-loss Alabama team could not get in over those 1-loss teams?
If their loss was to Georgia in like double overtime in the championship, then it's more feasible. But I don't think a one loss Oklahoma team, that means that they won their conference. A one loss Oklahoma State team means that they won their conference. Same thing with Wake Forest. If they that means that they're gonna win out and win in their conference
Okay,
championship game.
correct.
I don't see that.
A two-loss Alabama.
No, unless it's like a four overtime. Unless there's extenuating circumstances, like the quarterback goes out with a concussion. Like unless there's extenuating circumstances and it's a very tight game against the number one team in the country, I really don't see Alabama being able to sneak by a one loss team, a one loss conference champion with two losses.
Okay. Okay. Well, JJ, I'm just gonna say something. Alabama has struggled a lot this year in my mind.
Yeah.
They defeated Florida by 2 points when Florida failed on the 2-point conversion attempt with 3 minutes left in the game. Alabama lost outright 38-41 at Texas A&M on a game-ending field goal. And Alabama got a big scare at home from a 29-point underdog LSU team in a game which Bama won 20-14. This is my question. With Bama struggling in those games, those two games, and then losing the one that I just said, why does the bowl committee rank Alabama so high at number 2? And should they be ranked that highly?
I wouldn't rank them that highly personally. I would put Cincinnati ahead of them. But at this point, Alabama is an institution that we haven't seen anything comparable for a very, very long time, if ever.
Oklahoma maybe back in the day, but go ahead.
Maybe, but I don't know. I just think that at this point in time, they've earned a bit of a benefit of the doubt when the rest of the college football landscape is in such disarray outside of Georgia. I mean, there is a clear chasm between Georgia and everyone else, it seems. But if you put Alabama head to head against every of the remaining teams, Oregon, Cincinnati, Michigan State, Notre Dame, if you put them in a neutral field, Alabama would be favored to win, and I think that's with good reason. I think they honestly could be the second best team. I could honestly see a scenario in which they win out every SEC West game, make it to. Is it Atlanta or where the SEC championship
it's
game
in
is?
Atlanta.
It's in Atlanta. I could see them facing Georgia, wherever the SEC championship game may be, and losing to Georgia. But Georgia's the best team in the country, so.
The way it's set up right now with Alabama being ranked 2 and losing to number 1, when 2 loses to 1, would you expect 2 to drop to 5 or worse?
If you have 2 losses,
no, don't count the losses. Count the position. I mean, they already got a loss and they're ranked ahead of Cincinnati. If they're the number 2 team in the country and you lose to the number 1 team by, let's just say, 3 points, do you drop to 5?
I think everything is contingent. Nothing happens in a vacuum, so
True,
I think it just depends on what else happens in the college football landscape. But my point was, with them already having a loss and them going down to 2 losses means that they don't have a stranglehold on that number 2 spot.
Okay.
It's not like they're undefeated and Georgia's undefeated. I think that's
I see your point.
It's a different level of ranking, even though they're still considered the second best team in the country. I think it's just the chasm between 2 and 3 right now is a lot closer. So,
but you will agree that they did struggle against Florida, and they struggled against LSU, right?
Yeah, but every team has struggled against. I mean, every team outside of Georgia has pretty much struggled.
Well, LSU was down, I think, inside the 20, maybe the 25 in the last few minutes. Had they scored and got the conversion, they would have beat Alabama. Florida, had they made a 2-point conversion, would have sent the game into overtime most likely. And then Alabama just outright lost to Texas A&M. I don't know of any one-loss team that has struggled the way Alabama has struggled, personally. I mean, that's just me.
I mean, you could make that same argument about Michigan State, though. Michigan State beat Indiana by 5 points. I mean, that's a one possession game. They had to go to overtime to beat Nebraska at home. They were down against Michigan most of that game, and then they lost to Purdue. I don't know. I just don't think that. I don't know. I
Okay.
don't think that there's a dominant one loss team out in the country.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question about about Alabama. Saturday, Alabama plays Arkansas. Arkansas is 7-3. Uh, is this game at home for Alabama? Could this be a trap game for Alabama versus Arkansas? And I know Alabama is I think it's a 20.5 point favorite. It was a 20 and something. I think it was 20.5 point favorite in that game. Could this be a trap game for Alabama? Given Alabama's struggles against a 29 point favorite against LSU and a large favorite against Florida and Texas A&M as well. Could this be a trap game? Because next week, Alabama, the week after the Arkansas game, they have Auburn. Could this be a trap game?
I think it might have been before Auburn lost their quarterback for the season.
Okay.
I think with that happening, I think Arkansas is probably a better team than Auburn, and I think Alabama knows that. And I think one thing that Alabama doesn't really succumb to is, was it the rat poison is what Nick Saban calls it. I think if any team is equipped to avoid a trap game, it would be Alabama. I mean, Alabama has won 14 straight games against Arkansas. The last time Arkansas has even come within 2 touchdowns of Alabama was more than half a decade ago. So I am not. I mean, I am going to root my behind off hoping that Arkansas wins, but it's gonna, until Arkansas beats Alabama with Nick Saban, I'm not gonna predict it.
You're taking the easy way out, huh? See, I like to predict things before they happen.
Okay.
That's why they call it predicting.
Okay.
But I see your point. JJ, moving on, and general aspect of it. Currently, there's nine Power 5 teams with a 9-1 record. 9 of them. 3 of those teams are in the Big Ten. Why is the Big Ten so opposed to a 12-team playoff when potentially the Big Ten would stand to gain so much?
I don't think that they're necessarily opposed to a 12-team playoff. I think that they're opposed to a 12-team playoff that they don't get to dictate and control. I think that they want to be the driving force behind anything and everything. That's like kind of the Big Ten's reputation.
Okay.
So I just don't think. I think that, you know, the ideas of a 12-team playoff had been thrown around, and the SEC. One of the things that allowed the SEC to recruit Oklahoma and Texas was, allegedly, I guess, that there was the clause that you could have more than 2 conference teams. When you expand to 12 teams, they won't cap the number of conference teams at 2. So feasibly the SEC, the Big Ten, ACC, whatever conference, you get 3 or 4 teams. When obviously the conference most likely to get multiple teams in is SEC, but the Big Ten is just as obviously the next conference that's likely to do that. The Big Ten has 5 teams in the top 25 of the college football playoff, and the SEC has 6. And I don't think any other conference has more than 4. So I just think they've distinguished themselves, set themselves apart, but it felt like the college football playoff was the narrative of the expansion was being controlled by the SEC once we found out Texas and Oklahoma was joining. And I could see the Big Ten not wanting to let the SEC drive that.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, there's money to be had on the table, and depending on how they schedule things, it's very feasible that the Big Ten could get multiple teams in. So I think it's in their best interest that eventually they will expand.
Well, this is what I don't understand. With an expanded playoff, the Big Ten is set to make more money. Why would you be against making more money? That I don't understand. But that's neither here nor there. Speaking of money, JJ, before we close, we're getting ready to close. Michigan State's coach, Mel Tucker, He's in his second year. He has a record this year of 9-1. Last year 2-5. Combined record of 11-6. I was reading today where he's potentially being offered a 10-year contract for 95. I said $95 million. What's your take on that?
If he can get that money, I would tell him and his agent to sign on the dotted line as soon as possible. He has an overall record at 16-13 when you count in his 1 year at Colorado,
Okay.
his COVID year at Michigan State, and the 10 games he's coached this year.
So what was that record again?
16-13.
16-13. So that's a lot of million for each win.
Yeah, he would be the highest paid black coach in North America of any sport. He would be the highest paid black coach, and he'd be the second highest paid coach in college football, only behind his former
Jimbo? Nick Saban,
who would make $225,000 a year more. Who he was a graduate assistant under at Michigan State in '96.
And also he was Mel Tucker was with Saban when Saban was at LSU.
Yep, he left with Saban's LSU, but he's still a Midwest guy. He was born in Cleveland. He went to Wisconsin for football, and his first coaching gig was at Michigan State. So he's through and through a Midwest guy. It sounds like.
Hey, but money shakes the world. No one out there would. I can't imagine any school trying to match that kind of money. If that was your money, if you had $95 million over the next 10 years, and you were a big fan of a school, would you lay it out to Mel Tucker?
Not for a coach that hasn't even coached in 30 games yet. I think I might. But if I'm going to make someone the second highest paid coach in the profession, I think I'd want a little bit more of a data set. But MSU is kind of a coach dependent program, whereas LSU is.
What do you mean
less,
by coach dependent program?
I think how good their coach is depends on how good that they can be.
Okay.
Whereas a school like LSU doesn't. You don't really need a good coach. No disrespect to Ed Orgeron or Les Miles, but they're not exactly the brightest minds in the coaching world that we've ever seen. So, I think MSU, they need a coach that fits their culture, that can win with the players in the area that they recruit to. And if you find a guy that's successful in your system, in your program, I think locking him up is a good idea. It's just the timing is a little interesting with, the biggest game of the season for them coming up next at Ohio State.
So that's a bigger game than a Michigan game?
Well, the biggest game is always the next game.
Oh, that's true. I understand your point.
And Michigan State they're 4-3 against Michigan in the last 7 years. I think everyone's looking up to Ohio State. I think Ohio State is the biggest game. I understand Michigan's a bigger rival for Michigan State than playing against Ohio State, but Ohio State's the class of the conference, so I think that is the biggest game for every team in the Big Ten.
Agreed. Well, JJ,
what do you think about the deal from Michigan State's perspective and from Mel Tucker's perspective?
Well, I'll just say this, and I love Mel Tucker. I love Michigan State. I hope they go undefeated for the next 25 years with Mel Tucker right there in control. But I don't think there's any coach, even if you, my son, were being coached, I don't think you would deserve $9 million a year. I mean, that's just me. Maybe it's because I don't have $9 million, but if I had like $100 million, maybe I would say $9 million a year is nothing.
Or like Matt Ishbia, you had a billion, more than $1 billion.
If I had that kind of money, no problem. But I coaching, I think most coaches right here today, I think my own personal opinion is that most coaches are overpaid.
Yeah, but so are most hedge fund managers. To me, I mean, I don't know. I agree with you that most coaches are overpaid, but there are a lot of. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. That's true. You're gonna find people that are overpaid.
Supply and demand. I will say this: budget managers in the city of Lansing are not overpaid. That much I can tell you with a large degree of confidence. But JJ, anything else regarding the Big Ten and the SEC you want to talk about?
All right, I got nothing. I'm just excited to see how everything plays out down the home stretch.
Me too. Before we go, I just want to say I'm really, really looking forward to next week when we review the Michigan State, Ohio State game, and in addition, preview the Michigan Ohio State game. I'm looking forward to that, and also the Auburn Alabama game, the preview to that game.
Yeah, it'd be a little bit better if they had Bo Nix, but I'm still looking forward to the Iron Bowl.
Oh well, that's it.
That's it.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Be sure to come back regularly. Subscribe, give us a comment. We out of here. Peace out. WPS. Whoop Pig Suey.